Welcome to the AtoZrunning Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach. And up next, we answer your questions about in-race hydration, HIIT workout efficacy, and pacing ourselves. And after that, World of Running updates about Masters, Championships, new marathon majors, and more. If you missed submitting a question for this month's episode Q&A, have no fear. You can be on the next one. All you need to do is go to AtoZrunning.com/question, share your thoughts and your situation, and we are glad to offer some ideas. And of course, as you know, if we're offering ideas, they're definitely going to be correct, helpful, and will improve your circumstances.
Well, and the reason why that is the case is because we research these things, and we love getting questions from you because that helps us be able to better articulate to all of you and to our athletes these important discussions. So thank you to those of you who have submitted questions.
And those of you who have not and want to, go to AtoZrunning.com/question.
Yes. Now, we always talk about how we like relating with all of you, and we got a really nice email from Eric.
Truth.
And I'm going to share some of it, not all of it, here on the show today. He said, "Hi, Zach and Andy. I just want to reach out and to say thank you. I'm a runner turned triathlete."
Oh, I'm sorry, Eric.
You're multi-talented.
You started
Congratulations. Well. And first listened into your podcast for the episodes with Todd Buckingham. I've since gotten hooked on your podcast, and it's really reignited my love for running and has inspired me to take my own fitness and running performance more seriously. I'm looking forward to finishing out my triathlon season this summer and being able to focus more on my running over the winter and spring to put into practice some of the things you've talked about on your podcast. I just want to take a minute to thank you both for sharing your passion with the world. You're welcome. We are very passionate. And for the work you put into producing such a high quality podcast about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Hope to see you guys out on the race course someday.
Well, glad we could help you, Eric, find the straight and narrow again.
Thank you for those kind words, Eric. And we do also hope to see you on the course someday. I'm sure we will.
Definitely.
Now, we do have a discount code, again, that we want to reiterate to all of you with the hip hook. I've mentioned it on the show, and I love this thing. I used it last night, and I had a pretty tight psoas and iliacus. So this tool, which many of you are listening so you can't see it, it has a hip hook.
It has a thing that stabs you. And
it
another
helps
thing
trigger
that lets
release
you
your
stab yourself
muscles. So
worse.
if you want to know more about this product, I am linking to it, also to the show that we had the creator of the hip hook on to tell you more about the hip flexor complex, the hip flexor muscles, and why this tool is so helpful. But you can get a discount on it using the code ATOZ, A to Z, ATOZ. All you have to do is go to Aletha Health website, and you can use that at checkout. So I do recommend this tool, and it has brought me great relief. And a lot of runners have the same issues I do. I did want to make a personal note about it, and that's that my iliacus and psoas have stayed released more than usual after having the surgery, and it's been really nice because when I release it, I don't have to do it like every single day, which is awesome. So even though I had like the hip hook was great when I was having to do that because it helped me sleep better and everything, but I was having to continually go back to it. But now that I've been in PT and I've been strengthening and I've had the hip labrum repair, things are a lot better in my hips. And so then when I use the hip hook, it's able to be relaxed for far, far longer.
So the moral of the story is get surgery?
The moral of the story is this can be really helpful with your symptoms, but I think that it's really good to go to the root of the problem, which there's a book that has been created that surrounds the hip hook and how to use it, and also do corrective exercises and things. But you always want to do a deep dive into your own health to be your best advocate for yourself and to seek medical attention where you need it, so it can help you put all the pieces together to then solve the great mysteries that are the human body.
Very well. Thinking about solving great mysteries, we should get on to the main topic. All right, for this month's Q&A episode, we've got a series of interesting and very different questions. We do this on purpose. We try to feature the questions that are not always the same thing all the time, not suggesting that you're asking the same questions all the time. But as runners, we tend to have the same situations iteratively over the course of our own individual experiences, as well as across the universe of running. And that's why we like to do these kinds of episodes, because chances are every question someone has asked us is a question almost everyone else is or has wondered. Okay.
Or maybe they'll begin to wonder once they hear the question.
Yeah, or you'll hear the question and think, oh yeah, now I'm wondering that too. So now we're going to answer all of your questions about running. Starting with this first one, which I find to be just a fun experiment for those of us who never race the mile to contemplate such things, especially after the World Championships when we were watching all those races. So Christy asked, thank you, Christy, for asking, that she in particular has done like 1 mile time trials, like training types of runs, but not really a lot of 1 mile races. And her point is those 1 mile efforts have not generally gone very well. And she's curious then, how do you go about executing a 1 mile hard effort, even and especially in a race, for like, you know, pacing effectively for a good performance? Okay, so this is interesting because you're right, Christy, the 1 mile race is not the same kind of thing as any other distance races, assuming that they're longer than that.
You can't even sleep for a moment in a mile race. Like it has to be intentional. It has to be,
essentially what Andy's saying is it has to be uncomfortable 100% of the time.
It's going to be uncomfortable.
You cannot feel good at any point in a mile.
I do.
Okay, you can feel like strong and powerful, but you have to feel like you're pushing yourself.
You have to be, the whole time.
But that's kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because there's a couple of things we have to consider here. First, I think the 1 mile race is perhaps the most straightforward race, arguably, until you get down to the sprints. The sprints are very straightforward. Go as hard as you possibly can until you cross the line. The 1 mile...
You can't go out too fast. It's still...
I know. That's what I'm saying, though. The 1 mile is not a go as hard as you possibly can race, but it's close to that for distance runners. And so it's a straightforward one in terms of compared to all the other distance races out there. However, I've heard it said, and I don't know who originated this comment, and so I can't credit it appropriately, but the person who said it to me was Jim Robinson. Shout out to Jim Robinson. He is the coach at Lansing Community College and also one-time coach of Playmakers Elite Group. Okay, so Jim Robinson once said to me that in a 1 mile race, you basically have a chance to make one decision or one move, he said. And sometimes two, if you're really competent at the 1 mile distance and very well prepared for it. But essentially, you have a chance to make one change, one move during the race. And so, and as a 1 mile race, for those of us who don't routinely run middle distance racing, we have to think about that in terms of like, when are you going to make your one move? Because that's about it. For some, it basically is one of two things, usually. It's either early on, you make the move to like set an aggressive tone, and then that's going to just be it. The rest of the run, you're just running as hard as you can until you get to that line. Or you make the move later in the run to try to dial it up for like a final push. And, you know, when is that? Depends on how much energy you have left. So, Andy, you have a lot of experience running 1 miles effectively over the years. You have been a successful middle distance runner in your past. But does that hold true? In your experience, what was the 1 mile success like when you were executing it?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because I do think that it's different depending on the person. Now, at the time, I didn't realize this, but I was able to run it in a way that was beneficial for me. But I needed to go earlier than some of the other runners because I didn't have quite the amount of raw speed in the end to beat people when it came down to the final 100. Now, some people I did. It just depended on my competition, obviously. So I would often start kicking early. So
how early?
600 usually. 400, 600. That's really early. That's like half the race. So
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the situation, but yeah, one move, and that usually is, you know, tuck in you're not comfortable, but you are relaxed and pushing hard. And then when you usually decide beforehand, when am I going to go if I feel good? And you make that decision, and then you move. And that's, like Zach said, maybe your one move of the whole race. So it just depends. And we don't get an opportunity to run a lot of mile races. Zach says I'm experienced. Well, it's been like over a decade since I've been doing it regularly.
Well, you did one quite competently recently.
I did one last summer. So, but I just, it's not something that routinely we get an opportunity to do. So a suggestion to all of you who are listening who want to run a fast mile, maybe you're a local listener and you want to do Magic of the Mile. The mile is something that is better when practiced.
Oh, yeah.
So if you are able to do more than one in the summer,
in a short period of time, like
ideal.
One a week.
So if you could do a time trial, maybe even get some other people there, maybe do it together and be able to have some energy that surrounds it, because I know it does feel different when you're in a race. But even if you can't, doing time trials to practice the mile, I think is a really beneficial thing, because it isn't something that many of us distance runners are very familiar with, and it can feel like you're gambling. You're just rolling the dice, like, oh, is this too fast? Is this fast enough? And I think that we have to become, like we always talk about on the show, more intuitive runners. And I think that being able to have a couple practices to get into that feeling, to know what our limitations are when it comes to this distance, I think that's a beneficial thing to do. So I can't tell you, like, Christy, if you do this in the 5K, then you for sure can do this in the mile. There are all kinds of pace calculators out there, but I don't think they're as valuable as learning what the feeling is and being able to capture that and then execute in a race.
Defining what Andy is explaining physiologically, that it's a neuromuscular thing. So that's why you do something like race-specific preparation, is so that your body is ready to comfortably, now we did say the mile needs to be uncomfortable the whole time, but reasonably comfortably execute the effort for the amount of time you're trying to do it. And so for a 1 mile race, for a distance runner who's not like a middle distance person doing 800s and miles and stuff regularly, a 1 mile race is a very highly active state for a fairly long period of time compared to what you're used to in training. So you need to rehearse that. And generally you need to rehearse it for over the period of like 3 to 5 weeks or something before you're really going to find that you're comfortable going out and running a very hard mile and feeling like you're doing what your body can do, like you're producing what's possible. So in that sense then, Christy, to your question, how do you pace it out? And you have basically two options, and we're going to always lean toward the second one. The first option is you largely are trying to race the race, and so like it's a competitive thing. You try to stay as comfortable as possible, as long as possible, and then go as hard as you can, as early as you can, without running out of energy, right? So it's you kick when you feel like you can hold that kick through the rest of the race. And so for most competitive races, that's somewhere between 200 and 400 meters. Almost always. You'll see this across all different kinds of things. It's almost always 200 to 400 meters out. So assuming you're not likely running the race in that sense, then your next best option is to try to run essentially an even race. And in order to do that for a 1 mile, like we said, you have one move, right? Your move should happen about midway through the race for a 1 mile, somewhere in the like half to 3/4 range, which again puts us close to that last lap still. But what that move is you go out strong and you continue to run strong for 2 to 3 laps, depending on how you're feeling. And halfway through, you check in and you either dial it up again, or it's kind of like the gut check thing. Like, make sure that you're actually giving the kind of effort that you can. And if you're really struggling at that point, you wait another lap and then you go. It doesn't really matter how you're feeling. In a mile, even if you're feeling terrible, you have got to try to dial it up in the last lap, simply because you're going to feel bad probably no matter what at that point, if you're a distance runner trying to run a hard mile. And so that's the way we would recommend approaching it. So you look at it as 2 to 3 laps and then a change of pace or a change of effort. It may not be a change of pace. It might just simply be that the change of effort produces an even pace, which is most likely the outcome for most of us. But that's the way I'd go about it. And then, like Andy said, you got to rehearse it. If you really want that to work well in the goal, like I want to run this mile on this day really as fast as I can, that's the way you're going to have to do it.
And the recommendations that we have for doing drills and then also periods of time where we're doing strides, and that's neuromuscular. And we talk about rehearsing your body neuromuscularly. You don't need to do a hard workout to rehearse running fast. And so that can be a low energy expenditure or low impact on your distance training that can really benefit you in a shorter distance race. So rehearsing that doesn't mean you need to go and hit the track hard for a workout. It just means that on a regular basis, you're training your body, you're wiring your body to run faster.
Yeah, and the principle of neuromuscular training is that you always need to do as much as you can at as aggressive of a pace as possible without crossing the line of overdoing it. Mm-hmm. And so the best way to accomplish that is to learn how to execute fartleks well. Because once you can do fartleks well, then you're able to accomplish a lot neuromuscularly.
So that's an example of a workout. These other things I was saying, like the strides and the
so I'm getting to
drills.
That.
Okay.
And then the next best thing is to train your functional movement to be as effective as possible. And so you're going to need both of those pieces in the puzzle. And that's what Andy's trying to talk about. And then you put them together. And this is why we say you have to rehearse them out. Ultimately you have to combine them at some point. Your systems training, your precision work, and your actual like neuromuscular activity stuff, you have to combine them at some point. And that's why we do time trial things or even like early season races, or it could be late season, but it's not your goal race. We do that kind of a thing because that's where your body is learning how to put together all of those pieces for a sustained effort. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you've learned far more than you meant to.
Thank you for that question, Christy. It was a fun one. So Haley asked a question that I have heard from friends and whatnot, and I think it's a really great one to bring to all of you today. Haley asked, can HIIT style workouts be beneficial to endurance athletes? If so, why or why not? This is a great question because it's very tempting to do a HIIT workout that takes a lot less time than going out and running 90 minutes.
It's very popular.
It's very popular.
Faddish, which by itself should always make us wonder.
Well, I'm not saying it's not going to be bad. So HIIT workouts are not bad. HIIT workouts can help you in a lot of different goals that you might have, but maybe not your distance running goals. So if your goal is to burn calories, then HIIT is very effective. There's a benefit with the muscular strength aspect because a lot of HIIT workouts do a lot of things that help you in your strength and coordination. And there are things that are in HIIT workouts that we actually recommend that runners do for leg strength. So I'm not saying that HIIT workouts are in general a bad thing. It's just the purpose of it, the high intensity interval training, that piece of it is not going to be most effective for runners.
Well, and this is not a new question nor a new type of workout. For some reason, when the fad started, it was like HIIT workouts, this new thing. But it's like, since the 1930s and Emil Zatopek first said interval training is the best way to train, then people have been debating high intensity interval work. So that like even the phrase is not a new thing, but as it were, the concept and what Haley is probably asking specifically about is not running interval training, right, but like all of these just random other things. And I do say random because while many people who design HIIT workouts design them very deliberately around certain types of things, most of the time it's just the goal is just like combining lots of stuff that's hard to do. Mm-hmm. So that being the case, the first answer to the question is, what are you doing in the HIIT workout?
There are different ones.
And so depending on what you are doing, Haley, it has greater and lesser value for runners. Of course, we're answering specifically with the runner umbrella. So that being the case, yes, I would first just look at what is the stuff involved and where it's like specific to functional movement for runners and your 3 key strength building areas that you need as a runner. It's going to have greater value. However, more specifically, the piece of the question that says, is it beneficial to endurance athletes? I assume you mean, does it help with the endurance part of the athletics? And that's always been a fascinating question. And I don't understand exactly why the HIIT revolution has attempted to try to claim that it is more valuable to aerobic energy system development than, say, running. But for some reason, there's a concerted effort out there to say HIIT workout training is better for you aerobically than like long, slow cardiovascular work like biking and running. Now, that's simply untrue.
I mean, the science
It's
cannot support
entirely
that.
false. I don't know why they claim it that way, but what the claim that Andy and I have done a lot of investigating, not just in this instance, but we've looked at this kind of stuff because we get questions like these every now and then, especially for our own athletes. And what it attempts to prove circulate around efficiency for time. So if you do a 30-minute workout of some kind over the course of 3 weeks, and that workout is either a nice easy run or a HIIT workout, in those 3 weeks time, you're going to see greater system development from that HIIT workout 30 minutes at a time than you will from a 30-minute run. Or, in fact, what they have found and what they like to claim is even if you do something like a 60-minute run. So you do twice the running, but you get greater benefit from the 30-minute HIIT workout. Now, first, why is that? Because the HIIT workout is harder, and so you're straining your systems more. And that simply is going to produce greater adaptations in a vacuum. But we don't train in a vacuum. Also, no runner I've ever met trains for 3 weeks and then says, now I am fully trained for my performance potential. So try that same HIIT workout versus running study for 12 weeks and find out what changes. Because something does. Also, no runner that we train is going to run just 60 minutes here and there throughout. They're going to be running 2 or 2.5 hour runs. You can't do a HIIT workout for 2 hours, or even, you can't do a HIIT workout for 30 minutes every single day without recovery ramifications, because it takes more out of your system. So this goes back to the old debate, which is better, interval training or long, easy running? And of course, the answer is, well, a little bit of both, but a lot of it of the long, easy running if you want to develop your system as effectively and efficiently as possible over time. So, yes, there's some benefit, but I would never replace a run with a HIIT workout, ever.
So the ways that you can use HIIT workouts are maybe in between seasons and some of your downtime. Like if you view it that way and it's not impacting training, I think the reason why we don't throw them in intermittently is because it's going to impact training in a negative way when you're distance running training. So if you're not looking to be training for an event, then maybe that's a good time to mix things up and to do things like HIIT workouts. But if you are a runner who's maybe training for a marathon, and all of us are time poor. We know this. We have talked to so many of you. We don't have enough time to mess around doing all kinds of things. And if this is not most effective for our training, then what I would suggest is to do leg strength circuits. We will link to some of those that are specific for runners. And some of the moves are actually going to be the same. Some of the exercises are actually going to be the same that they have in HIIT workouts, but we're not going to bring you past the point of and become anaerobic, because that's what some of these HIIT workouts are going to do, which then cause a ramification for your training. So we want to keep it focused on what we need as runners, and that's going to be a little bit different than the HIIT workouts, even though they can still have some value.
That's a good explanation. So if you're going to do stuff like that, do it deliberately in ways that focus around what you need as a runner, and do it within a schedule that allows for regularity, because stuff like that you just do occasionally here and there, very little benefit. Think about it like this. Every time you do a new exercise of any kind, you have 2 layers of adaptation. The first layer of adaptation is like my body has to get used to doing that motion. And so that's where the soreness and all that kind of stuff comes from. You've got muscle tissues and fibers that are not used to working in that way. And then once you get past that, then you can actually achieve sustainable adaptations from it. And so if you do it occasionally here and there, you never achieve sustainable adaptations. You just get sore every time.
And you burn calories, which if that is your goal, then
you're burning a few calories here and there.
But that for training for a marathon, that is not the goal. So
not usually.
Anyway, yeah, I thought that was a really good question by Haley, and one that lots of people ask.
Here's one final caveat for you, because it's always an interesting one in this type of stuff. Arthur Lydiard once did long ago when he had one of his gold medalist runners who showed up for the beginning of a season, and I don't know exactly what his standard for saying this was, but he said he was overweight. And I have no idea what that means, because there's no classification of exactly what was going on. And so what he did for the next 3 or 4 weeks with that runner is he had him train with sprinters doing high intensity interval training.
Okay.
Why? Because it is effective at burning calories in short term, and it's also effective at fat burning specifically. So once again, what's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish by it? These things have a place in certain instances.
Cool. Very good.
Last question for this episode, and this one in particular is a lot of fun for us to answer because it's related to World Championships again. This one from Pete about the women's marathon in the World Championships and Andy's favorite runner, Kira D'Amato. So Pete wrote, looking at Kira D'Amato's Strava from the World Championship Marathon. And she did, by the way, if you didn't notice, Kira D'Amato posts on Strava like everything she does. And so it's kind of fun to be able to see like the data breakdown from a runner from the World Championships. And so you can see that if you want to go to Kira's Strava, and then you get a lot of fun dad jokes too. And he continued, I see her pace fell off around mile 16. And then the question, what's magical about the 16 to 18 mile range that runners for marathons, whether it's the mid-pack people, the elites, the pros like Kira, they tend to fade. And then Pete calls me out and says, Zach, I recall you mentioning that in your most recent marathon, it was roughly around that range when you were struggling too. And then further, at one point, Pete mentioned that he thought it was more time-based point of fatigue. So if you're running for 2 hours, it's the same for 2 hours, regardless of what distance you're covering. But is there a mileage component as well? Or is it all just in my head? That's an interesting caveat. So the first thing I should mention is the Bayshore reference. And you're right, Pete, that it was right around mile 16 to 18 when I noticed that the issues were starting to form. What it was in particular, my quads were starting to express themselves unpleasantly. And in that instance, however, and this is the difference here, I was not struggling yet or having a hard time with it yet. I just simply knew that I was going to, and it just slowly kind of progressively worsened after that. And so it was like mile 21, I think, when I started to slip. I started to see the slippage in pace as a result of it, and just couldn't sustain the pace anymore. So in that question, that just explaining that situation a little bit more. In that question, I want to answer it in two ways because one of them is entirely speculative, and I'm just going to give you Zach's random speculation for a little bit. But the other one is there are some things that we do know with certainty about how marathoning is experienced. First, at some point in a marathon, there's a good chance that you will run out of energy. Usually, hopefully, that's at the finish line. But for most of us, it's earlier than the finish line. And the reason for this is, essentially you have a limited supply of energy, and you usually use all of it without being able to replace it before the end of a marathon. That's normal. That's understood to be the case for most of us. The reason why is because we all have basically the same energy store. And so if we get into the details of it, it's like you got about 2,000 calories of stored glucose somewhere in your body. It's in your liver and it's in your skeletal muscles, tissues, basically. And so if you've got about 2,000 calories, assuming that you've maxed out your storage prior to the race, which is why you need to eat that good carb heavy breakfast or glucose heavy, breakfast before the race. That's why you want to take some stuff like a gel or something an hour before the race, not just during the race, because you want that 2,000 calorie storage to be full because you don't get more than that. And so as a result, most people, when that's gone, that's when they start to experience this sudden dip in energy. That's what the wall is. The wall can be musculoskeletal, but it's generally not. It's usually an energy system thing. You've run out of readily available energy and your body doesn't know what to do next. And so it starts drawing from the proteins in your muscles. And that's why your muscles can't function as well anymore. Okay, so that aside, we've got that. Now, controlling for all the important variables, meaning that we're ignoring how you train, we're ignoring the individual differences between runners and a number of other things. All of that, it's expected that if a runner wants to end a marathon with exactly zero energy left, that runner is going to expend the same amount of calories per mile as anyone else, right? Because it's the same distance. So if we want zero, we only have 2,000 available, we're using, like 80 calories per mile. But that's not possible because we would basically be walking if we did that. So we have to then account for the difference in how we're taking in things in the race. So now this gets into what's really fascinating about this, which is, like depending on how long you're running a marathon, you're expending substantially more energy. And so that means that you're having to take in more energy. And so like Kira ran her race in like 2 hours and 20 some odd minutes. She did not expend as many calories in her 2 hours and 20 some odd minutes as a 3.5 hour marathoner does. And in fact, the difference has a lot to do with other individual things. And so Kira's also, a reasonably small person. And so she can use fewer calories per mile to run a marathon than someone who is not as small as her. And so there's a lot going on there. And all of this is to say, first, there's not anything magic about this 16 to 18 mile range. Inherently, there's nothing specifically about that. For some people, that tends to be the spot. And so, Pete, you may experience regularly when I have trouble in a marathon, it's around the same point in time. That's pretty common for most of us. That's for different reasons and depending on your situation. So it could be, because you're going out too hard and you're expending.
That was your case. Calling you out again.
Could be that. That was what I did. And so you're going out too hard, and so you're expending too much energy per mile, and you don't have enough left. But also, we know that if you're using if your system is too highly active, it doesn't process energy in the same way. And so this is Kira's problem. This is what happened to Kira in the race. She ran too hard too early on, and her system was not processing energy the way it probably could have if she was more evenly racing. And we know this because Kira's run substantially faster than that in a marathon, right? How was she able to do that very recently, accounting for, assuming that it was comparable days and such. And the large part because her system was too highly activated too early on, potentially. And so that's one consideration
Speculation.
Here. This is speculation because I don't know all the details of Kira's energy consumption. So that piece of the puzzle is an important one to consider. And the closer you are to maximum, the more energy you're burning, but the less effective your system is at using its available energy, and the less capable your system is at processing new intake of energy. Okay? So this is fine. Keep in mind, this is really important. So like when I run a marathon in 2 hours and 20 minutes or something like that, I am probably expending about 2,500 calories of energy, something like that. I'm controlling for all the variables that, we are going to influence this. But that being the case, if I have 2,000 stored calories, I really only need to consume a small amount of additional intake at some point during that run to make sure I have enough of something. Also, if I've trained my system to use more than the 2,000 available, like drawing from stored fat for energy, for example, which can only happen at a lower effort level. So if I can do that, say for the first half of the race, and then increase my effort level, now I'm capable of running at a higher effort and using my 2,000 calories that are stored without running out of those 2,000 calories. So the whole point here, Pete, is that this comes back to a lot to do with how I'm executing stuff, with how I've trained and prepared for these kinds of things, the degree of effort that I'm running. And we have to consider that it matters for the amount of time, but since we're covering the same distance, there's some comparable considerations regardless of the amount of time we're covering. So there's a number of different things going on there. The case in point for all of us is that the longer it takes you to cover a marathon, the more energy you need to be able to take in during that run. And the further away from maximum you can run versus if it were to take you substantially less time, because you have to be able to cover a larger swath of energy expenditure.
Side note that many of you guys already know, early and often is when you're going to be fueling in your marathon.
Yeah, you want to be taking in stuff. You want to be taking in stuff regularly, and you want to be taking in stuff in small quantities. That's what you have. Well, and various sources of things. So you don't want to take just the same thing the entire time. Mm-hmm. Those are going to give you the best chances for processing the calories. And as Stacy Sims wrote in her popular book, Roar, it really almost always has less to do with the specifics of what you're taking in fuel-wise and more to do with the degree of hydration during that time. Because her point is you're really likely able to very easily take in enough calories that your body has what it needs. It's not terribly hard to do that if you're taking things regularly, like we just described. But where people tend to go the most wrong seems to be more in the hydration side.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your questions. And now we're going to be talking about the world of running.
First up, before we cover the topics at large, a quick update from A to Z runners. We had a lot of races in the last week and so. Hannah running a 50K. What a endeavor. Mm-hmm. Very difficult things to do. Kathy running a tri relay.
She's the run part.
Yeah, Dano, first in age group in both the 5K and 10K double that he ran. Julie, first in age group in a 5K, and then second in age group in the following 10K.
Doubling up like the same day.
We had a lot of runners doing the same event and doubling both of them.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Martha and Mark both also did the 5K, 10K double on that same day. Andrew did a 10K third in age group. And then we had a few cross-country runners because, you know, some people are crazy like that. Cross-country is, in fact, loads of fun.
Yeah.
And that includes Zach, Erica, and Kelly all competing in the cross-country challenge. What a great event.
Yeah.
Lots of fun.
Congrats, everyone. Now we're going to be talking about the triple winner at the U.S. Masters Track and Field Championships. We're not going to break down the entire event for you, but I love to bring to you interesting information. And there was someone who won 3 events. There might be more than one someone, but I'm going to highlight today Michelle Rao. And she was a 1996 Olympian in the race walk. And at this event, at 56 years old, she won the 800, the 5,000, and the 1,500 meter runs. All 3 of them. That's an impressive triple.
That is an interesting spread of events.
Exactly.
800, 1,500,
and she was a
5,000.
race walker before all of this, and she was 14th at the 1996 10K walk at the Olympics.
Oh, very nice.
She's a 4-time U.S. champion. So there's a lot of interesting information about her that I'll put at the AtoZrunning.com episode link. And in the 800, I want to mention her times because they're impressive for anyone, but especially as a Masters runner. She ran 2:23 in the 800 meter run, and she defended her title from the last event. And then Raul came in only second away from her own American record in the 800 meter run, and she was silver medalist. Excuse me, that was the same one. So both the 800, and then Raul won the 5,000 in 18:33.
Okay.
I mean,
at 56 years
that's
of age,
amazing.
that is very fast.
That's very fast.
Yeah.
And she also won that at the 2021 World Masters Championships in Finland this year. So that's very impressive. She seems to be one of the best in the world at it at her age. And then Raul also won the 1,500 meter, wrapping it up in 4:56.
Just doing everything very fast.
Yeah. So that was very interesting. Congrats to Michelle.
Great. I hope at 56 years old, I'm still having fun racing and competing like that. Well, there is, in fact, the likely addition of new races to the Abbott World Marathon Majors circuit. They've been talking about this for a few years now, and entered into consideration the 3rd and final installment. So all 3 of these races have the potential of becoming new marathon majors. The 3rd one was just recently announced, and Andy's super excited about it. This comes from EnduranceSportsWire.com. The 3 candidates are
Cape Town.
Cape Town in South Africa.
That's
the
one
South Africa?
That's what I'm excited about.
Where is Cape Town? I think it's in South Africa. Anyway, Cape Town, which is the coolest looking race website.
Beautiful.
That course has just got to be well, both challenging and awesome. And so that could be an interesting addition. It would be the only, let's see, where are all the Masters? I'm trying to think like global regions.
You mean majors?
Yes, thank you. So we've got USA, Europe, and Japan. Are those the only, right?
Paris.
Okay. Yes, which is Europe.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, there's a few.
Paying attention enough to what you're saying.
Yep. Okay. So anyway, I'm just trying to make sure where we have regionally, because part of the intent here with these 3 candidates is that they are new regions, new areas of the world where there are no marathon majors, and so that's kind of interesting to see which ones are potential. So we've got Cape Town, and then we've got Chengdu, which is China, which is like right smack in the center of China, and that marathon in particular has been a candidate for a little while now. So their candidacy will either be ratified or denied in the next couple of years here, very soon. And then Sydney, Australia, is the latest addition.
He said that I was most excited about that, but actually I'm most excited about Cape Town. Zach's most excited about Sydney, Australia. So it sounds like we're gonna have to make 2 trips.
We are definitely not likely going to either of them.
What?
Because they're very far away.
We'll discuss this later, Zach. We'll discuss this later.
But yes, so Sydney was just recently announced, and that's where the news kind of came down here. And Sydney's a pretty big marathon, certainly as it is already internationally acclaimed. And they have a 3-year trial period. So by 2025, we should know if any or all of these 3 races will be new marathon majors.
So Ron Romano, who is on our podcast, who has done all the world majors within a year, he's got a couple more that perhaps he'll have to do, depending on how many are accepted.
Well, depending on when they are, I don't know the dates on any of these races. That may or may not be possible anymore. It also adds a new flavor to the 6-star thing. You know, if you've done all of them, which he did them all in 1 year, but just in general, if you've run all of them, it's like this unique medal that you can get.
Yeah.
But if there are 9, that changes the scope there.
Yeah, it does.
Some people might need to go back to the drawing board.
Very difficult and very expensive.
Indeed that. But lots of fun. All right, number 3, finally on our coverage here, we wanted to mention a very interesting interview. So we covered for you in the World Championships the upset 1,500-meter victory by Jake Whiteman over Jakob Ingebrigtsen. And Whiteman of the UK, in particular, is coached by his dad, who also was an internationally successful runner. Yes, they
coached
both
by their dads.
Yep.
I mean, Jacob's not anymore, but he was.
Yep, Ingebrigtsen and Whiteman have both been coached by their dads.
Cool.
So Whiteman's dad, Jeff, in particular, had a really interesting interview with Athletics Weekly. And so we've linked to the interview. You should definitely read the whole thing. There's some video footage you can watch too if you want. And it's just fascinating. One question in particular he was asked that I found very interesting was asked specifically about his own running versus coaching his kids. And he coaches a few other athletes too, not just Jake. But he was asked which is like more exciting, winning races himself or watching his kids win races. And I really appreciate his response. And I quote, "I also think that everyone wants the best for their kids, whether that's careers, happiness, or health. It's a good question, but I prefer to see our children progress and take pleasure in their achievements." And I was like, oh, this guy, what a guy. So that's the person you want as your coach, if he's your dad, right? But the thing that I enjoyed perhaps the most was he went on then to simply comment about how his other kids do other things, theater and politics in particular, and he's just as excited to watch them succeed and participate in those things as he is in the running side of it. And I was like, this guy has his priorities straight.
Well done, really Dad. Cool. Well done.
Mm-hmm. He also, and he had a couple of other comments that were kind of funny. So some snarky things that he said to Jake, which was always fun. One being about when Jake first saw him like after the race, he's like, "Great job, nice work. You got Commonwealth Games next. Like, don't fall asleep because we're not done." One of those things, Thanks, Dad. Anyway, the other one I wanted to mention here is when he was asked about coming off of a World Championships victory, which is like a very high point, and that can be a difficult thing. Like you're kind of sitting on top of the world. What does that change about your perspective and your experiences? And he says, if you're a world champion, you'd be expected to win most races that you do. But there will be times when he will line up out of season in cross-country races or other things, and he won't be in 10 out of 10 form, and he'll have to take that one on the chin. And of course, I certainly hope he's telling him that, because just because he won that race doesn't mean he's going to win any other races. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the most interesting things that it changes how we view ourselves and those around us in a moment like that. And yet, there's no particular reason why it ought to. Because just because I won that race doesn't change anything about me and the others around me in the next race.
It's true.
It is very fascinating.
And it's very important to manage expectations. And that's a big part of thinking about racing and being able to put things in perspective. If you expect yourself to be perfect every time, we discussed mistakes and triumphs in the last couple episodes. If we expect ourselves to be perfect all the time, we're going to be frustrated. But if we're able to move on gracefully, if we're able to take that experience and see what we can learn and then, progress to the next time, we're going to have a much healthier perspective and also enjoy it more, because the pressure won't be quite as gnawing if we're thinking that we have to be perfect. So
Yeah, one of the greatest reflections I've heard on the topic is when asked, I don't know who said this, when asked about how to motivate new runners or new athletes, it specifically was, the answer was, you want the person to experience as soon as possible both a taste of success and of failure. Because if you don't have both of them, it's a lot harder to motivate the person.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could see that in a very small time frame with Jakob Ingebrigtsen in the 1500,
right?
Being highly motivated in that 5,000.
That's cool. Well, speaking of being highly motivated, chances are you are that as well. And we want to definitely participate with you in your experiences and your excitement. And certainly if we can be helpful, we'd love to do so, like answering questions like in these episodes. So go to AtoZrunning.com, look for the word follow or for the contact to ask us a question. Or if you need some more specific support and you're not getting it from these other means, check out the coaching. Mm-hmm. And we have a number of services.
Exactly. I was going to mention that we do customized training programs, which there is no one size fits all, and everyone's life is different. We want to put you in the driver's seat so that you can thrive, because otherwise sometimes we become a slave to training and the training is not serving us. And so we want your training and all that hard work that you're doing to serve you and to most effectively get you to the best shape possible for your race. So that's why customized is better than generic, and we would love to help you out.
Indeed that. So head to AtoZrunning.com, look for the word coaching.
All right. Well, we will talk to you next week.